Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to our study of In Search of the Miraculous. We've arrived at chapter 10, and chapter 10 is maybe difficult to believe, but among the most metaphysical chapter, or there's a lot of metaphysics in this chapter, and things that are difficult to verify, I suppose, would be another way to say it, that a lot of what Gurdjieff is saying, there's no tangible way to verify it, so we have to sort of look at our own belief systems and what we think is possible and go from there. So I'm looking forward to sharing this one. We're well over halfway now, and let me just read the contents for you of what's coming up in this chapter. From what does the way start? The law of accident, kinds of influences, influences created in life, influences created outside life, conscious in their origin only, the magnetic center, looking for the way, finding a man who knows, the third kind of influence, conscious and direct, liberation from the law of accident, step, stairway and way, special conditions of the fourth way, wrong magnetic center is possible. How can one recognize wrong ways? Teacher and pupil. Knowledge begins with the teachers of cosmoses. The usual concept of two cosmoses, the macrocosm and the microcosmos. The full teaching of seven cosmoses, or cosmoses maybe, relation between cosmoses as 0 to infinity, principle of relativity, the way up is at the same time the way down, what a miracle is, period of dimensions, survey of the system of cosmoses from the point of view of the theory of many dimensions, G's comment that time is breath, is the microcosmos man or the atom? And so that's what I mean by rather metaphysical. We've got dimensions, cosmoses, influences, 0 and infinity. And so, there's a lot of mind-bending stuff. And so we have to just, like I say, read and read again and keep studying and learning. And if we continue to review the material over and over, it begins to sink in and we can understand it more fully. But for now, Chapter 10 of In Search of the Miraculous. Once there was a meeting with a large number of people who had not been at our meetings before. One of them asked, "From what does the way start?" The person who asked the question had not heard G's description of the four ways, and he used the word way in the usual religious mystical sense. The chief difficulty in understanding the idea of the way, said G, consists in the fact that people usually think that the way, he emphasized this word, starts on the same level on which life is going. This is quite wrong. The way begins on another, much higher level. This is exactly what people usually do not understand. The beginning of the way is thought to be easier or simpler than it is in reality. I will try to explain this in the following way. Man lives in life under the law of accident and under two kinds of influences, again governed by accident. The first kind are influences created in life itself or by life itself, influences of race, nation, country, climate, family, education, society, profession, manners and customs, wealth, poverty, current ideas, and so on. The second kind are influences created outside this life. Influences of the inner circle or esoteric influences. Influences, that is, created under different laws, although also on the earth. These influences differ from the former, first of all, in being conscious in their origin. This means that they have been created consciously by conscious men for a definite purpose. Influences of this kind are usually embodied in the form of religious systems and teachings, philosophical doctrines, works of art, and so on. They are let out into life for a definite purpose and become mixed with influences of the first kind. But it must be borne in mind that these influences are conscious only in their origin. Coming into the general vortex of life, they fall under the general law of accident and begin to act mechanically. That is, they may act on a certain definite man or may not act. They may reach him or they may not. In undergoing change and distortion in life through transmission and interpretation, influences of the second kind are transformed into influences of the first kind, that is, they become, as it were, merged into the influences of the first kind. If we think about this, we shall see that it is not difficult for us to distinguish influences created in life from influences whose source lies outside life. To enumerate them, to make up a catalogue of the one and the other is impossible. It is necessary to understand, and the whole thing depends upon this understanding. We have spoken about the beginning of the way. The beginning of the way depends precisely upon this understanding, or upon the capacity for discriminating between the two kinds of influences. Of course, their distribution is unequal. One man receives more of the influences whose source lies outside life, another less. A third is almost isolated from them. But this cannot be helped. This is already fate. Speaking in general and taking normal life under normal conditions and a normal man, conditions are more or less the same for everybody, that is, to put it more correctly, difficulties are equal for everybody. The difficulty lies in separating the two kinds of influences. If a man in receiving them does not separate them, that is, does not see or does not feel their difference, their action upon him also is not separated. That is, they act in the same way, on the same level, and produce the same results. But if a man in receiving these influences begins to discriminate between them, and put on one side those which are not created in life itself, then gradually discrimination becomes easier, and after a certain time a man can no longer confuse them with the ordinary influences of life. The results of the influences whose source lies outside life collect together within him. He remembers them together, feels them together. They begin to form within him a certain whole. He does not give a clear account to himself as to what, how, and why, or if he does give an account to himself, then he explains it wrongly. But the point is not in this, but in the fact that the results of these influences collect together within him, and after a certain time they form within him a kind of magnetic centre, which begins to attract to itself kindred influences, and in this manner it grows. If the magnetic centre receives sufficient nourishment, and if there is no strong resistance on the part of the other sides of a man's personality, which are the results of influences created in life, the magnetic centre begins to influence a man's orientation, obliging him to turn round and even to move in a certain direction. When the magnetic centre attains sufficient force and development, a man already understands the idea of the way, and he begins to look for the way. The search for the way may take many years and may lead to nothing. This depends upon conditions, upon circumstances, upon the power of the magnetic centre, upon the power and the direction of inner tendencies which are not concerned with this search and which may divert a man at the very moment when the possibility of finding the way appears. If the magnetic centre works rightly, and if a man really searches, or if he does not search actively yet feels rightly, he may meet another man who knows the way and who is connected directly or through people with a centre existing outside the law of accident, from which proceed the ideas which created the magnetic centre. Hello there, Woody B and Igor. I'm going to say that. See you tonight, Woody B. Here again there are many possibilities, but this will be spoken of later on. For the moment, let us imagine that he has met a man who really knows the way and is ready to help him. The influence of this man upon him goes through his magnetic centre, and then, at this point, the man frees himself from the law of accident. This is what must be understood. The influence of the man who knows the way upon the first man is a special kind of influence differing from the former two, first of all in being a direct influence, and secondly in being a conscious influence. Influences of the second kind which create magnetic centre are conscious in their origin, but afterwards they are thrown into the general vortex of life, are intermixed with influences created in life itself, and are equally subject to the law of accident. Influences of the third kind can never be subject to the law of accident. They are themselves outside the law of accident, and their action also is outside the law of accident. Influences of the second kind can proceed through books, through philosophical systems, through rituals. Influences of the third kind can proceed only from one person to another, directly by means of oral transmission. The moment when the man who is looking for the way meets a man who knows the way is called the first threshold or the first step. From this first threshold the stairway begins. Between life and the way lies the stairway. Only by passing along this stairway can a man enter the way. In addition, the man ascends this stairway with the help of the man who is his guide. He cannot go up the stairway by himself. The way begins only where the stairway ends, that is, after the last threshold on the stairway, on a level much higher than the ordinary level of life. Therefore, it is impossible to answer the question, from what does the way start? The way starts with something that is not in life at all, and therefore it is impossible to say from what. Sometimes it is said, in ascending the stairway, a man is not sure of anything. He may doubt everything, his own powers, whether what he is doing is right, the guide, his knowledge and his powers. At the same time, what he attains is very unstable. Even if he has ascended fairly high on the stairway, he may fall down at any moment and have to begin again from the beginning. But when he has passed the last threshold and enters the way, all this changes. First of all doubts he may have about his guide disappear, and at the same time the guide becomes far less necessary to him than before. In many respects he may even be independent and know where he is going. Secondly, he can no longer lose so easily the results of his work, and he cannot find himself again in ordinary life. Even if he leaves the way, he will be unable to return where he started from. This is almost all that can be said in general about the stairway and about the way, because there are different ways. We have spoken of this before, and, for instance, on the fourth way there are special conditions which cannot be on the other ways. Thus, the conditions for ascending the stairway on the fourth way are that a man cannot ascend to a higher step until he places another man upon his own step. The other, in his turn, must put in his place a third man in order to ascend higher. Thus, the higher a man ascends, the more he depends upon those who are following him. If they stop, he also stops. Such situations as this may also occur on the way. A man may attain something, for instance, some special powers, and may later on sacrifice these powers in order to raise other people to his level. If the people with whom he is working ascend to his level, he will receive back all that he has been sacrificed. But if they do not ascend, he may lose it altogether. There are also various possibilities as regards the teacher's situation in relation to the esoteric center. Namely, he may know more or he may know less about the esoteric center. He may know exactly where the center is and how knowledge and help was or is received from it. Or he may know nothing of this and may only know the man from whom he himself received his knowledge. In most cases, people start precisely from the point that they know only one step higher than themselves, and only in proportion to their own development do they begin to see further and to recognize where what they know came from. The results of the work of a man who takes on himself the role of teacher do not depend on whether or not he knows exactly the origin of what he teaches, but very much depends on whether or not his ideas come in actual fact from the esoteric center, and whether he himself understands and can distinguish esoteric ideas, that is, ideas of objective knowledge, from subjective, scientific, and philosophical ideas. So far I have spoken of the right magnetic center, of the right guide, and of the right way, but a situation is possible in which the magnetic center has been wrongly formed. It may be divided in itself, that is, it may include contradictions. In it, moreover, may enter influences of the first kind, that is, those created in life, under the guise of influences of the second kind. or the traces of influences of the second kind, but distorted to such an extent that they have become their own opposite. Such a wrongly formed magnetic center cannot give a right orientation. A man with a wrong magnetic center of this kind may also look for the way, and he may meet another man who will call himself a teacher and will say that he knows the way and that he is connected with a center standing outside the law of accident. But in reality he may not know the way and may not be connected with such a center. Moreover, here again there are many possibilities. 1. He may be genuinely mistaken and think that he knows something when in reality he knows nothing. 2. He may believe another man who, in his turn, may be mistaken. And 3. He may deceive consciously. Then, if the man who is seeking the way believes him, he may lead him in a quite different direction and not where he promises. He may lead him very far from the right way and bring him to results directly opposite to the results of the right way. But fortunately this happens very rarely. That is, wrong ways are very numerous, but in the majority of cases they do not lead anywhere, and a man simply turns circles on the same spot and thinks that he is going somewhere. How can a wrong way be recognized? Asked somebody. How can it be recognized? Said G. It is impossible to recognize a wrong way without knowing the right way. This means that it is no use troubling oneself how to recognize a wrong way. One must think of how to find the right way. This is what we are speaking about all the time. It cannot be said in 2 words, but from what I have said, you can draw many useful conclusions if you remember everything that has been said and everything which follows from it. For example, you can see that the teacher always corresponds to the level of the pupil. The higher the pupil, the higher can be the teacher. But a pupil of a level which is not particularly high cannot count on a teacher of a very high level. Actually, a pupil can never see the level of the teacher. This is a law. No one can see higher than his own level. But usually people not only do not know this, but, on the contrary, the lower they are themselves, the higher the teacher they demand. But right understanding of this point is already a very considerable understanding. But it occurs very seldom. Usually the man himself is not worth a brass farthing, but he must have as his teacher no other than Jesus Christ. To less he will not agree, and it never enters his head that even if he were to meet such a teacher as Jesus Christ, taking him as he is described in the Gospels, he would never be able to follow him, because it would be necessary to be on the level of an apostle in order to be a pupil of Jesus Christ. Here is a definite law. The higher the teacher, the more difficult for the pupil, and if the difference in the levels of the teacher and pupil go beyond a certain limit, then the difficulties in the path of the pupil become insuperable. It is exactly in connection with this law that there occurs one of the fundamental rules of the fourth way. On the fourth way there is not one teacher. Whoever is the elder, he is the teacher. And as the teacher is indispensable to the pupil, so also the pupil indispensable to the teacher. The pupil cannot go on without the teacher, and the teacher cannot go on without the pupil, or pupils. And this is not a general consideration, but an indispensable and quite concrete rule on which is based the law of man's ascending. As has been said before, no one can ascend onto a higher step until he places another man in his own place. What a man has received, he must immediately give back. Only then can he receive more. Otherwise from him will be taken even what he has already been given. At one of the following meetings in the presence of G, when he made me repeat what he had said about the way and about magnetic center, I embodied this idea in the following diagram. V, the big circle around all the thingies, is life. Then we have H, an individual man. A, influences created in life, that is, in life itself, the first kind of influences. B, and these are the arrows in the top of the circle. B, influence created outside life, but thrown into the general vortex of life, the second kind of influences. Then we have H, a man connected by means of succession with the esoteric center or pretending to it. H1 that was. E is the esoteric center standing outside the general laws of life. That's the little circle outside. M, magnetic center in man. C, influence of man H1 on man H. In the event of his actually being connected with the esoteric center directly or by succession, this is the third kind of influences. This influence is conscious, and under its action at the point M, that is, in the magnetic center, a man becomes free from the law of accident. H2, a man deceiving himself or deceiving others and having no connection either directly or by succession with the esoteric center. At one of the following meetings, after a fairly long talk on knowledge and being, G said, "Strictly speaking, you cannot as yet speak of knowledge because you do not know with what knowledge begins. Knowledge begins with the teaching of the cosmoses. You know the expression macrocosm and microcosm. This means large cosmos and small cosmos, large world and small world. The universe is regarded as a large cosmos and man as a small cosmos, analogous to the large one. This establishes, as it were, the idea of the unity and the similarity of the world and man. The teaching of the two cosmoses is known from the Kabbalah and other more ancient systems, but this teaching is incomplete and nothing can be derived from it. Nothing can be built on it. Nothing can be derived from it because this teaching is merely a fragment split off from another, much fuller, ancient, esoteric teaching about cosmoses or worlds, included one within another, and created in the image and the likeness of the greatest of them, including in itself all the others. As above, so below is an expression which refers to cosmoses. But it is essential to know that the full teaching on cosmoses speaks not of two, but of 7 cosmoses, including one within another. 7 cosmoses taken together in their relation to one another alone represent a complete picture of the universe. The idea of 2 analogous cosmoses accidentally preserved from a great and complete teaching is so incomplete that it can give no idea whatever of the analogy between man and the world. The teaching on cosmoses examines 7 cosmoses. The first cosmos is the protocosmos, the first cosmos. The second cosmos is the aeocosmos, the holy cosmos, or the megalocosmos, the great cosmos. The third cosmos is the macrocosmos, the large cosmos. The fourth cosmos is the deuterocosmos, the second cosmos. The fifth cosmos is the mesocosmos, the middle cosmos. The sixth cosmos is the tritocosmos, the third cosmos. The seventh cosmos is the microcosmos, the small cosmos. The protocosmos is the absolute in the ray of creation, or world 1. The aeocosmos is world 3, all words in the ray of creation. The macrocosmos is our starry world, or the Milky Way, world 6 in the ray of creation. The deuterocosmos is the Sun, the solar system, world 12. The mesocosmos is all planets, world 24, or the Earth as the representative of the planetary world. The tritocosmos is man, the microcosmos is the atom. As I have already explained before, said G, what is called atom is the smallest amount of any substance in which the substance retains all its properties, physical, chemical, physical and cosmic. From this point of view, there can, for instance, be an atom of water. You see that in the general order of the 7 cosmoses, the microcosm and the macrocosm stand so far apart from each other that it is impossible to see or establish any direct analogy between them. Each cosmos is a living being which lives, breathes, thinks, feels, is born, and dies. All cosmoses result from the action of the same forces and the same laws. Laws are the same everywhere, but they manifest themselves in a different, or at least in not quite the same way on different planes of the universe. That is, on different levels. Consequently, cosmoses are not quite analogous one to another. If the law of octaves did not exist, the analogy between them would have been complete. But owing to the law of octaves, there is no complete analogy between them, just as there is no complete analogy between the different notes of the octave. It is only 3 cosmoses taken together that are similar and analogous to any other 3. The conditions of the action of laws on each plane, that is, in each cosmos, are determined by the 2 adjoining cosmoses, the one above and the one below. 3 cosmoses standing next to one another give a complete picture of the manifestation of the laws of the universe. One cosmos cannot give a complete picture. Thus, in order to know one cosmos, it is necessary to know the 2 adjoining cosmoses, the one above and the one below the first, that is, one larger and one smaller. Taken together, these 2 cosmoses determine the one that lies between them. Thus, the mesocosmos and the microcosmos taken together determine the tritocosmos. The deuterocosmos and the tritocosmos determine the mesocosmos, and so on. The relation of one cosmos to another is different from the relation of one world to another in the astronomical ray of creation. In the ray of creation, worlds are taken in the actual relation in which they exist in the universe for us, from our point of view. The moon, the earth, the planets, the sun, the Milky Way, and so on. Therefore, the quantitative interrelation of the worlds one to another in the ray of creation is not permanent. In one case or on one level it is greater, for instance, the relation of all suns to our sun. In another case, on another level, it is less, for instance, the relation of the earth to the moon. But the interrelation of the cosmoses is permanent and always the same. That is to say, one cosmos is related to another as 0 to infinity. This means that the relation of the microcosmos to the tritocosmos is the same as that of 0 to infinity. The relation of the tritocosmos to the mesocosmos is that of 0 to infinity. The relation of the mesocosmos to the deuterocosmos is that of 0 to infinity, and so on. In order to understand the meaning of the division into cosmoses and the relation of cosmoses to each other, it is necessary to understand what the relation of 0 to infinity means. If we understand what this means, the principle of the division of the universe into cosmoses, the necessity of such a division, and the impossibility of drawing for ourselves a more or less lucid picture of the world without this division, will immediately become clear to us. The idea of cosmoses helps us to understand our place in the world, and it solves many problems, as, for instance, those connected with space, with time, and so on. And above all, this idea serves to establish exactly the principle of relativity. The latter is especially important, for it is quite impossible to have an exact conception of the world without having established the principle of relativity. The idea of cosmoses enables us to put the study of relativity on a firm basis. At the first glance, there is much that seems paradoxical in the system of cosmoses. In reality, however, this apparent paradox is simply relativity. The idea of the possibility of broadening man's consciousness and increasing his capacities for knowledge stands in direct relation to the teaching on cosmoses. In his ordinary state, a man is conscious of himself in one cosmos, and all the other cosmoses he looks at from the point of view of one cosmos. The broadening of his consciousness and the intensifying of his psychic functions leads him into the sphere of activity and life of 2 other cosmoses simultaneously, the one above and the one below, that is, one larger and one smaller. The broadening of consciousness does not proceed in one direction only, that is, in the direction of the higher cosmoses. In going above, at the same time, it goes below. This last idea will, perhaps, explain to you some expressions you may have met with in occult literature. For instance, the saying that the way up is at the same time the way down. As a rule, this expression is quite wrongly interpreted. In reality, this means that if, for instance, a man begins to feel the life of the planets, or if his consciousness passes to the level of the planetary world, he begins at the same time to feel the life of atoms, or his consciousness passes to their level. In this way, a broadening of consciousness proceeds simultaneously in two directions, towards the greater and towards the lesser. Both the great and the small require for their cognition a like change in man. In looking for parallels and analogies between the cosmoses, we may take each cosmos in three relations. 1. In relation to itself. 2. In relation to a higher or a larger cosmos. And 3. In its relation to a lower or smaller cosmos. The manifestation of the laws of one cosmos in another cosmos constitutes what we call a miracle. There can be no other kind of miracle. A miracle is not a breaking of laws, nor is it a phenomenon outside laws. It is a phenomenon which takes place according to the laws of another cosmos. These laws are incomprehensible and unknown to us, and therefore miraculous. In order to understand the laws of relativity, it is very useful to examine the life and phenomena of one cosmos as though looking at them from another cosmos, that is, to examine them from the point of view of the laws of another cosmos. All the phenomena of the life of a given cosmos, examined from another cosmos, assume a completely different aspect and have a completely different meaning. Many new phenomena appear and many other phenomena disappear. This, in general, completely changes the picture of the world and of things. As has been said before, the idea of cosmoses alone can provide a firm basis for the establishment of the laws of relativity. Real science and real philosophy ought to be founded on the understanding of the laws of relativity. Consequently, it is possible to say that science and philosophy, in the true meaning of these terms, begin with the idea of cosmoses. Having said these words after a fairly long silence, G turned to me and added, "Try to discuss all that I have said just now from the point of view of your dimensions." All that you have said, I said, refers without doubt to the problems of dimensions, but before I pass to them I should like to elucidate one point, which is not quite clear to me. It is what you said about the microcosmos. We are accustomed to connect the idea of the microcosmos with man. This means that man represents a world in himself, a world analogous to the large world, the macrocosmos. But you give man the name tritocosmos, that is, the third cosmos. Why third? The first is protocosmos, the second the sun or deuterocosmos. Why is man the third cosmos? It is difficult to explain at present, said G. You will understand this later. But do you really mean that the concept microcosmos cannot be used in relation to man? Asked one of the audience. This creates a strange difference in terminology. Yes, said G. Man is the tritocosmos. The microcosmos is the atom, or rather, he paused as though looking for a word, the microbe. But do not stop over this question. All that will be explained later. Then he again turned to me. See what you can say from your point of view, taking everything just as I said it. First of all, we must examine what the ratio of 0 to infinity means, I said. If we understand this, we shall understand the relation of one cosmos to another. In the world accessible to our study, we have a perfectly clear example of the relation of 0 to infinity. In geometry, this is the relation of one unit of a certain number of dimensions to another unit of a greater number of dimensions. The relation of a point to a line, of a line to a plane, of a plane to a solid, of a solid, that is, of a three-dimensional body to a four-dimensional body, and so on. If we adopt this point of view, we shall have to admit that the relation of one cosmos to another is the relation of two bodies of different dimensions. If one cosmos is three-dimensional, then the next cosmos, that is, the one above it, must be four-dimensional, the next five-dimensional, and so on. If we take the atom or microbe, as you say, that is, the microcosmos as a point, then relative to this point, man will be a line, that is, a figure of one dimension. The next cosmos, the Earth, will be a plane relative to man, that is, it will have 2 dimensions, as is actually the case for direct perception. The Sun, the solar system, will be 3-dimensional for the Earth. The starry world will be 4-dimensional for the Sun. All worlds are 5-dimensional, and the absolute or protocosmos is 6-dimensional. What personally interests me most in this new system of cosmoses is that I see in them the full period of dimensions of my new model of the universe. It is not merely a coincidence of details, it is absolutely identical. I do not know how it has come about. I have never heard of 7 cosmoses related to one another in the ratio of 0 to infinity. Nevertheless, my period of dimensions coincides with this absolutely exactly. And you can see just quickly, hello there, Kathy. Good morning to you. And you can see what I was saying in the introduction at the beginning, that this information about cosmoses and dimensions and relativity and 0 to infinity, these things are designed, I believe, it's my opinion, that you have to contemplate these things. You have to sit with them, meditate on them, think about them regularly and often in order to grasp them. This is what he's talking about earlier, about the esoteric center, influences outside of life. Although it's a book and we're reading it, or you guys are listening to it on YouTube, it's what I always say about powerful or potent, This information it comes from outside of life. Although we're experiencing it through life, in life, I believe Gurdjieff's work and teachings comes directly from magnetic center, esoteric center, and this is why these ideas are so powerful. Kathy, I don't know exactly, but it's the 11th page of chapter 10. The period of dimensions contains within itself 7 dimensions. The 0 dimension, the first, the second, and so on up to the 6th dimension. The 0 dimension, or the point, is a limit. This means that we see something as a point, but we do not know what is concealed behind this point. It may actually be a point, that is, a body having no dimensions, and it may also be a whole world, but so far removed from us, or so small, that it appears to us as a point. The movement of this point in space will appear to us as a line. In the same way, the point itself will see the space along which it moves as a line. The movement of the line in a direction perpendicular to itself will be a plane, and the line itself will see the space along which it moves in the shape of a plane. Up to now I have examined the line from the point of view of the point, and the plane from the point of view of the line. But the point, the line, and the plane can also be taken from the point of view of a 3-dimensional body. In this case, the plane will be the boundary of the body, or its side, or its section. The line will be the boundary limiting the plane, or the section of the plane. The point will be the limit, or the section of the line. A 3-dimensional body differs from the point, the line, and the plane by the fact that it has a real physical existence for our perception. The plane is in fact only a projection of a body, the line is a projection of a plane, and the point is a projection of a line. A body has an independent physical existence, that is, it possesses a number of different physical properties. But when we say a thing exists, we mean by this existence in time. But there is no time in 3-dimensional space. Time lies outside the 3-dimensional space. Time, as we feel it, is the 4th dimension. Existence is for us existence in time. Existence is time, is movement or extension along the 4th dimension. If we take existence as an extension along the 4th dimension, if we think of life as a 4-dimensional body, then a 3-dimensional body will be its section, its projection, or its limit. But existence in time does not embrace all the aspects of existence apart from existing in time. Everything that exists exists also in eternity. Eternity is the infinite existence of every moment of time. If we conceive time as a line, then this line will be crossed at every point by the lines of eternity. Every point of the line of time will be a line in eternity. The line of time will be a plane of eternity. Eternity has one dimension more than time. Therefore, if time is the fourth dimension, eternity is the fifth dimension. If the space of time is four-dimensional, then the space of eternity is five-dimensional. And just quickly, a brief commentary or comment. I don't know anything about maths, and I'm no mathematician, but I have heard several mathematicians speak on popular podcasts, so they're trying to simplify these terms, and I've heard many mathematicians say that their minds or their maths, their sums, their equations can operate in 12-dimensional universes, and it's just the physical world that's limited. Like Ouspensky, I think, is still talking here. It's limited to 3 and 4 dimensions because that's all we can perceive. 3-dimension in the body, and the 4th dimension, the time along we're going, right? We're now at 41 minutes into this video. 50 seconds, 51, 52, time progressives this way. And this is the 4th dimension, and then the 5th dimension is eternity. And like I say, we need a mathematician to help us understand these things, and to, again, it's not intuitive how to understand these things. So that's what I mean. We need to contemplate and chew on these things. Further, in order to understand the idea of the 5th and 6th dimension, a certain view of time must be established. Every moment of time contains a certain number of possibilities, at times a small number, at others a great number, but never an infinite number. It is necessary to realize that there are possibilities and there are impossibilities. I can take from this table and throw on the floor a piece of paper, a pencil, or an ashtray, but I cannot take from the table and throw on the floor an orange which is not on the table. This clearly defines the difference between possibility and impossibility. There are several combinations of possibilities in relations to things which can be thrown onto the floor from this table. I can throw a pencil, or a piece of paper, or an ashtray, or else a pencil and a piece of paper, or a pencil and an ashtray, or a piece of paper and an ashtray, or all three together, or nothing at all. There are only these possibilities. If we take as a moment of time the moment when these possibilities exist, then the next moment will be a moment of the actualization of one of the possibilities. A pencil is thrown on the floor. This is the actualization of one of the possibilities. Then a new moment comes. This moment also has a certain number of possibilities in a certain definite sense, and the moment after it will again be a moment of the actualization of one of the possibilities. The consecutiveness of these moments of actualization of one possibility constitutes the line of time, but each moment of time has an infinite existence in eternity. The possibilities which have been actualized continue to be endlessly actualized in eternity, while the non-actualized possibilities continue to remain non-actualized and non-actualizable. And sorry to chip in again here, just a good example. I think it is actually, Gurdjieff talking now, but he gives the example there of things, the possibilities of things that you can throw off the table, and that it's impossible to throw off the table an orange that's not there. But I like a more very practical or tangible thing about the actualization of a possibility is if you're having a conversation or an argument or a discussion and you say something that in hindsight and after the fact you wish you hadn't said, you can never unsay that, right? So if you're having an argument with your spouse, you're getting very angry and you sort of be really vicious and, one of them really horrible phrases or insults, and you say it and you go, and you wish you hadn't said it, you actualize that possibility, and now you cannot unactualize it. It's done. The whole universe is different now because of what you said. And I just think that's a very good example, very tangible, and more than likely we've all experienced it, in an argument. You've said something, this used to be your best friend, but because you were so horrible, you begin now drifting apart because of what you said, because of what you brought into the universe. So, yeah, I just find that a very helpful way to view this idea of possibilities and actualities. Again, you could say if you're not in the room with your spouse or your friend and they're not on the phone, you don't have the possibility of annoying them. Or so, sorry, back to the text here at the top. But all the possibilities that have been created or have originated in the world must be actualized. The actualization of all the possibilities created or originated constitutes the world's being. At the same time, there is no place for the actualization of these possibilities within the limits of eternity. In eternity, everything that has been actualized continues to be actualized, and everything non-actualized continues to remain non-actualized. Eternity, however, is only a plane crossed by the line of time. At every point of this line there remains a certain number of non-actualized possibilities. If we imagine the line of the actualization of these possibilities, they will proceed along radii, issuing from one point at different angles to the line of time and the line of eternity. These lines will proceed outside eternity, outside the five-dimensional space in higher eternity, or in six-dimensional space in the sixth dimension. The sixth dimension is the line of the actualization of all possibilities. The fifth dimension is the line of the eternal existence or repetition of the actualized possibilities. The fourth dimension is the sequence of the moments of the actualization of one possibility. As I have said, 7 dimensions from 0 dimension to the 6th dimension constitute the full period of dimensions. Beyond this period there is either nothing or the same period may repeat itself on another scale. Oh no, sorry, it is Ouspensky because it says here, my new model of the universe. As I have already said, the system of cosmoses, the exposition of which we have just heard, strikes me above all by the fact that it fully corresponds to the period of dimensions which is the basis of my new model of the universe. Only this system of cosmoses goes still further and explains many things which were not clear in my model of the universe. Thus, if we take the microcosmos, that is, the atom or microbe, as G has defined it, then the tritocosmos for it will be a 4-dimensional space. The mesocosmos will be 5-dimensional space, and the deuterocosmos 6-dimensional space. This means that all the possibilities of the atom or microbe are realized within the limits of the solar system. If we take man as the tritocosmos, then for him the mesocosmos will be 4-dimensional space, the deuterocosmos 5-dimensional space, and the macrocosmos 6-dimensional space. This means that all the possibilities of the tritocosmos are realized in the macrocosmos. Therefore, parallel with this, all the possibilities of the mesocosmos are realized in the aeocosmos, and all the possibilities of the deuterocosmos or the sun are realized in the protocosmos or the absolute. As every cosmos has a real physical existence, every cosmos therefore is 3-dimensional for itself or in itself. In relation to a lower cosmos, it is 4-dimensional. In relation to a higher cosmos, it is a point. And that's a very important way to view this idea of cosmoses. To put it differently, it itself It is itself three-dimensional, but the fourth dimension lies for it in the cosmos above and the cosmos below. This last point is perhaps the most paradoxical, but nevertheless it is exactly as it should be. For three-dimensional body, such as is a cosmos, the fourth dimension lies as much in the realm of very large magnitudes as in the realm of very small magnitudes, as much in the realm of what is actually infinity as in the realm of what is actually zero. And that's a pretty profound statement, and you could argue that, are they one and the same thing, right? Zero and infinity, are they not just different, well, like what we're learning here, different dimensions or different cosmoses? I'm trying to explain it, but I should just carry on reading. Further, we must understand that the three-dimensionality of even one and the same body can be different. Only a six-dimensional body can be completely real. A five-dimensional body is only an incomplete view of a six-dimensional body. A four-dimensional body is an incomplete view of a five-dimensional body. A three-dimensional body is an incomplete view of a four-dimensional body. And of course, a plane is an incomplete view of a three-dimensional body, that is to say, a view of one side of it. In the same way, a line is an incomplete view of a plane, and a point is an incomplete view of a line. Moreover, we do not know how a six-dimensional body can see itself as three-dimensional. Somebody looking at it from outside may possibly also see it as a three-dimensional body, but in a completely different kind of three-dimensionality. For instance, we represent the Earth to ourselves as three-dimensional. This three-dimensionality is only imaginary. As a three-dimensional body, the Earth is something quite different for itself from what it is for us. Our view of it is incomplete. We see it as a section of a section of a section of its complete being. The earthly globe is an imaginary body. It is the section of a section of a section of the six-dimensional Earth. But this six-dimensional Earth can also be three-dimensional for itself, only we do not know, and we can have no conception of the form in which the Earth sees itself. Oh yeah, that's right. They're 161157. The monad and all of these ideas, the monad, the duad, the triad, and these things, this geometric stuff. And yeah, you have to really sit with these words and ideas in order to grasp them, as I've said already, and it's probably clear enough if you're listening to this. The possibilities of the Earth are actualized in the Eocosmos. This means that in the Eocosmos, the Earth is a six-dimensional body. And actually, we can, to a certain extent, see in what way the form of the Earth must change. In the Deuterocosmos, that is, in relation to the Sun, the Earth is no longer a point, taking a point as a scale reduction of a three-dimensional body, but a line which we trace as the path of the Earth around the Sun. If we take the Sun in the macrocosmos, that is, if we visualize the line of the Sun's motion, then the line of the motion of the Earth will become a spiral encircling the line of the Sun's motion. If we conceive a lateral motion of this spiral, then this motion will construct a figure which we cannot imagine because we do not know the nature of its motion, but which, nevertheless, will be the six-dimensional figure of the Earth, which the Earth itself can see as a three-dimensional figure. It is necessary to establish and to understand this, because otherwise the idea of the three-dimensionality of the cosmoses will become linked with our idea of the three-dimensional bodies. The three-dimensionality even of one and the same body can be different. And this last point seems to me to be connected with what G calls the principle of relativity. His principle of relativity has nothing in common with the principle of relativity in mechanics or with Einstein's principle of relativity. It is the same again as in the new model of the universe. It is the principle of the relativity of existence. At this point I ended my survey of the system of cosmoses from the point of view of the theory of many dimensions. There is a great deal of material in what you have said G, but this material must be elaborated. If you can find out how to elaborate the material that you have now, you will understand a great deal that has not occurred to you till now. For example, take note that time is different in different cosmoses, and it can be calculated exactly. That is, it is possible to establish exactly how time in one cosmos is related to the time of another cosmos. I will add only one thing more. Time is breath. Try to understand this. He said nothing further, although later in the book Gurdjieff speaks more about this idea that time is breath. Later on, one of G's Moscow pupils added to this that, speaking with them once of cosmoses and of different time in different cosmoses, G had said that the sleep and waking of living beings and plants, that is, 24 hours or a day and a night, constitute breath of organic life. And like I say, we will learn more about that in a later chapter. Hello there, Nikos. Nikos, how are you? And just another example of these different dimensions, what he's saying there, right? To us, living on the earth, I imagine we're all on the earth, it doesn't feel like it's moving, right? It doesn't feel like it's orbiting the earth and rotating on its axis, yeah? But then if you go out and you look at the earth, you can see it's just very fascinating, but not easily graspable. So I think for many people, it sort of turns you off, it switches off, it's very difficult to grasp, so I'm just going to ignore it or say that it's rubbish. But if we work hard and sort of learn something auxiliary and then come back and read this chapter again, we can go a little bit deeper. G's lecture on cosmoses and the talk following it greatly aroused my curiosity. This was a direct transition from the three-dimensional universe with which we had begun to the problems which I elaborated in the new model of the universe, that is, to the problem of space and time and higher dimensions, on which I had been working for several years. For over a year, G added nothing to what he had said about cosmoses. Several of us tried to approach these problems from many different sides and, although all of us felt a great deal of potential energy in the idea of cosmoses, for a long time we got no results. We were especially confused by the microcosmos. If it were possible to take man as the microcosmos and the tritocosmos as the human race, or rather as organic life, it would be much easier to establish the relation of man to other cosmoses. One of us, Z, said in this connection, who with me had attempted to understand and to develop further the idea of cosmoses. But on the one or two occasions that we began to speak to G about it, he persisted in his definitions. I remember once when he was leaving Petersburg, it was possibly even his final departure in 1917, one of us asked him at the station something relating to cosmoses. Try to understand what the microcosmos means, answered G. If you succeed in understanding this, then all the rest about which you ask now will become clear to you. I remember that when we talked about it later, the question was quite easy to solve when we took the microcosmos as man. It was certainly conditional, but nevertheless it was in complete accord with the whole system which studied the world and man. Every individual living being, a dog, a cat, a tree, could be taken as a microcosmos. The combination of all living beings constituted the tritocosmos, or organic life on earth. These definitions seemed to me the only ones that were logically possible, and I could not understand why G objected to them. At any rate, some time later, when I returned again to the problem of cosmoses, I decided to take man as the microcosmos, and to take the tritocosmos as organic life on earth. With such a construction, a great number of things began to be much more connected, and once, looking through a manuscript of Glimpses of Truth, given me by G, that is, the beginning of the story that was read at the Moscow group, the first time I went there, I found in it the expressions macrocosmos and microcosmos. Moreover, microcosmos meant man. And here is the passage from Glimpses of Truth. And if you're interested in hearing the full Glimpses of Truth talk, then you can go into the In Search of the Miraculous commentary, I think, or just search it up and you'll find it. Now you have some idea of the laws governing the life. Excuse me. Now you have some idea of the laws governing the life of the macrocosmos and have returned to the earth. Recall to yourself, as above, so below. I think that already, without any further explanation, you will not dispute the statement that the life of individual man, the microcosmos, is governed by the same laws. This still further strengthened us in our decision to understand microcosmos as applying to man. Later it became clear to us why G wished to make us apply the concept microcosmos to small magnitudes as compared with man, and to what he wished to direct our thought by this. I remember one conversation of this subject. If we want to represent graphically the interrelation of the cosmoses, I said, we must take the microcosmos, that is, man, as a point. That is to say, we must take him on a very small scale and, as it were, at a very great distance from ourselves. Then his life in the tritocosmos, that is, among other people and in the midst of nature, will be the line which he traces on the surface of the earthly globe in moving from place to place. In the mesocosmos, that is, taken in connection with the 24 hours motion of the earth around its axis, this line will become a plane, whereas taken in relation to the sun, that is, taking into consideration the motion of the earth around the sun, it will become a three-dimensional body, or in other words, it will be something really existing, something realized. But as the fundamental point, that is, the man or the microcosmos, was also a three-dimensional body, we have consequently two three-dimensionalities. In this case, all the possibilities of man are actualized in the sun. This corresponds to what has been said before, namely that man, number 7, becomes immortal within the limits of the solar system. Beyond the sun, that is, beyond the solar system, he has not and cannot have any existence, or in other words, from the point of view of the next cosmos, he does not exist at all. A man does not exist at all in the macrocosmos. The macrocosmos is the cosmos in which the possibilities of the tritocosmos are realized, and man can exist in the macrocosmos only as an atom of the tritocosmos. The possibilities of the earth are actualized in the megalocosmos, and the possibilities of the sun are actualized in the protocosmos. If the microcosmos, or man, is a three-dimensional body, then the tritocosmos, organic life on earth, is a four-dimensional body. The earth has 5 dimensions and the sun 6. The usual scientific view takes man as a three-dimensional body. It takes organic life on earth as a whole, more as a phenomenon than a three-dimensional body. It takes the earth as a three-dimensional body, the sun as a three-dimensional body, the solar system as a three-dimensional body, the Milky Way as a three-dimensional body. The inexactitude of this view becomes evident if we try to conceive the existence of one cosmos within the other, that is, of a lower cosmos in a higher, of a smaller cosmos in a greater, such as, for instance, the existence of man in organic life, or in relation to organic life. In this case, organic life must inevitably be taken in time. Existence in time is an extension along the 4th dimension. Neither can the earth be regarded as a three-dimensional body. It would be three-dimensional if it were stationary. Its motion around its axis makes man a 5-dimensional being, whereas its motion around the sun makes the earth itself 4-dimensional. The earth is not a sphere but a spiral encircling the sun, and the sun is not a sphere but a kind of spindle inside the spiral. The spiral and the spindle taken together must have a lateral motion in the next cosmos, but what results from this motion we cannot know, for we know neither the nature nor the direction of the motion. Further, 7 cosmoses represent a period of dimensions, but this does not mean that the chain of cosmoses comes to an end with the microcosmos. If man is a microcosmos, that is, a cosmos in himself, then the microscopic cells composing his body will stand towards him in about the same relation as he himself stands to organic life on Earth. A microscopic cell, which is on the boundary line of microscopic vision, is composed of milliards of molecules comprising the next step, the next cosmos. Going still further, we can say that the next cosmos will be the electron. Thus we have obtained a second microcosmos, the cell, a third microcosmos, the molecule, and a fourth microcosmos, the electron. These divisions and definitions, namely cells, molecules, and electrons, are possibly very imperfect. It may be that with time science will establish others, but the principle will remain always the same, and lower cosmoses will always be in precisely such relation to the microcosmos. It is difficult to reconstruct all the conversations which we had at the time about cosmoses. I return particularly often to G's words about the difference of time in different cosmoses. I felt that here was a riddle which I could and must solve. Finally, having decided to try to put together everything I thought on the subject, I took man as the microcosmos. The next cosmos in relation to man I took as organic life on Earth, which I called Tritocosmos, although I did not understand this name, because I would have been unable to answer the question why organic life on Earth was the third cosmos. But the name is immaterial. After that, everything was in accordance with G's system. But the name, below man, that is, as the next smaller cosmos, was the cell. Not any cell, and not a cell under any conditions, but a fairly large cell, such as, for instance, the embryo cell of the human organism. As the next cosmos, one could take a small, ultra-microscopic cell. The idea of two cosmoses in the microscopic world, that is, the idea of two microscopic individuals differing one from the other as much as a man does a man from a large cell, is perfectly clear in bacteriology. The next cosmos was the molecule, and the next the electron. Neither molecule nor electron appeared to me to be very sound or reliable definitions, but for the lack of others these could be taken. Such a succession undoubtedly introduced or maintained a complete incommensurability between the cosmoses, that is, it preserved the ratio of 0 to infinity, and later this system made possible many very interesting constructions. The idea of cosmoses received a further development only a year after we heard it for the first time, that is, in the spring of 1917, when I succeeded for the first time in constructing a table of time in different cosmoses. But I will speak of this table further on. I will only add that G never explained, as he promised, the names of the cosmoses and the origin of these names. And that is chapter 10. Any questions, guys, before we say goodbye are welcome. But like I say, you have to really chew on these things for a lot of time. Maybe read some cosmology book. Maybe read some other philosophical text, Plato, or, Ouspensky's Tertium or Ganem, or his new model of the universe. And really contemplate these ideas, because they're very metaphysical, very geometric, right? Very cosmological. It sure was, Kathy. A lot of bones to pick out of that, right? Before you can digest it. So yes, it was a powerful chapter. Lots to be taken out of it and from it. But you have to sit with these things. You have to sit with them, and whether it be thought experiments or contemplations, or whatever it may be. That's right, Kathy. Kathy says it's like the multiverse, but I would say it's more this concept of relativity that modern science doesn't recognize. They don't recognize relativity, or not in the sense that Gurdjieff's talking about it, and that each cosmos is to the other as 0 to infinity. So is in a sense like the octaves that we learnt about earlier, but in regards to the cosmos. And like I say, it doesn't do it justice just to read through it like that. We should really be pondering and contemplating it. But of course, yeah, like Russian dolls, is it? Yeah, that's right, Kathy. Like Russian dolls, you know, you get the little dolls, the big one, and then inside it, and then inside it, and then inside it. And so, like he's saying, the idea of the yeah, that's right, Kathy. But what he says somewhere in there is that man or humanity doesn't exist to the macrocosmos. So this is a very interesting thing, right? Because when you're certain dimensions away, if one dimension to the next is as 0 to infinity, then if you're 2 dimensions above, whatever one, then it just won't recognize it. Like the sun won't recognize any electrons and microbes and atoms on the earth, right? Because it's just insignificant. The bandwidth, the resolution would be too far away. It may not even, the sun doesn't even care about individuals, right? And this is an interesting religious question as well, isn't it? You know, does God hear individual prayers? And I'm not going to, talk about that. That's something for us as individuals to contemplate and ponder, And some religious systems would say, no, he doesn't, but the angels do, and the angels pass them up. But again, I'm not getting into theological speculations here at the end of our video. Yeah, I don't know about that, Kathy. Kathy asks, can we evolve our sixth sense in a way to pick up on some of it? And I'd say possibly, and if you go back to the beginning of the chapter, where Gurdjieff's talking about the influences, right? The esoteric center and influence, it comes from outside of life. So yes, I imagine by whatever you mean by sixth sense, or our intuition, or our third eye, or all of these things, you'll be able to more easily connect with these things that exist outside of life. But everyone, thanks for joining. Like I say, when I do these In Search of the Miraculous chapters, I never expect to see many people, so it's lovely to see you guys. Thanks for coming in and joining, because again, it's not for everyone, and chapter 10 is a bit of a blow someone's mind if they're, imagine you're completely new to Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and you just came in at chapter 10 with all this talk of cosmoses. You'll be put off for life. So guys, thanks for being here. Please feel free to comment in the video once the live ends if you have any realizations about the cosmoses and dimensions. And yeah, we'll be back soon for chapter 11. And I think we've decided in our little online group that we will read the reality of being next after In Search of the Miraculous. So I'm looking forward to that and the impressions that brings. So yes, Kathy, I'm sorry I don't know your name, 161157, and Nikos, thanks for being here with me. Look after yourselves, go back to the beginning and ponder certain passages and see if you can extract all the juice out. But for now, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.